Hello, I'm Evangelos Bantourakis. This is number 0656 of the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there. Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0656. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, we remember actor and musician Conrad Janis, best known for his role as Mindy's dad on the sitcom Mork and Mindy. He died recently at the age of 94. How did he get the Mork and Mindy gig?
I was in a series that Richard Benjamin starred in that Buck Henry wrote called Quark, Q-U-A-R-K. And the producer of it was Bruce Johnson. And we ran about a season on Quark. It wasn't a hit show. But the producer went over to Mork and Mindy, and he called me up and said, well, you've done Quark, now come over and do Mork. So I transferred over there.
Leigh Cooney, owner and operator of the Little Prince Micro Cinema in Stratford, Ontario, which is now in the Guinness World Records for being the world's smallest purpose-built cinema in operation. It only has 13 seats. When he first built it, he wasn't thinking about any kind of record.
When I set out to build this place, it was not my intention at all, actually. We were just going to build a little screening room. So, folding chairs, pull-down screen, that sort of thing, just to support local short filmmakers. And then once I started doing it, I thought, we should do tiered seating, obviously, so you can see over people's heads. And then I thought, well, if we're going to do tiered seating, then we should put some old-timey wallpaper and some red velvet curtains. And it just sort of grew from there. After a little while, it started looking more and more like a tiny theater.
Nicole Fanning, author of Ignite, the second novel in her Heart of the Inferno series that follows the story of a dangerous Mafia don and his romantic entanglement with a nurse. What is Nicole's fascination with the Mafia?
I was always fascinated with these bigger underground crime organizations. You and I writing a book on a crime organization, we're going to paint them in a certain light, but someone who's either been in it or been around someone who's been in it is a different perspective. And what I found was really interesting was that those perspectives were all about how they had this intrinsic sense of loyalty and honor to their family, not necessarily to a government. They have their own hierarchies and their own kind of system of morality, and that was always really fascinating to me.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day coming your way. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0656, was Evangelos Bantourakis, owner of Peddler's restaurant in the Montreal area of LaSalle. I may be biased, but I think that this is the best place for breakfast. Not only is the food great, but the staff are amazingly friendly and playful. It's always a joy. So thank you very much, Evangelos, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff, shall we? Let me share with you the story of 55-year-old airline pilot Greg Lynn. Now, Greg is claiming age discrimination after being let go by budget airline Jetstar after 15 years of service. Greg lives in Australia, which is where Jetstar is based, and was fired in January. The Transport Workers Union is backing Greg in the grievance process. In a statement, the union said Captain Lynn has not engaged in misconduct. However, they went on to say that he is unable to present for work for no reason that has been established that Captain Lynn is responsible for. And folks, there lies the sticky wicket. Greg hasn't shown up for work since November. That's when he was arrested and charged with murder of 2 people. He has not applied for bail and has been held in jail ever since. Wow. The fact that he's claiming age discrimination for the reason that he lost his job is, I think, the height of delusional. I mean, hey, the guy is a jet pilot. Doesn't that pretty much define the concept of flight risk? Yeah. Denver, Colorado police have asked for tips after an incident involving a box truck. No body is missing. Well, no whole body, just heads, a box of them. The container was marked with the name of a program that supplies donor cadavers for scientific purposes, but where exactly the heads were headed was not immediately revealed. Along with the heads, a dolly was stolen. Well, of course a dolly was stolen. I mean, it's not like you're going to carry human heads like you would carry a bowling ball. What I want to know is, what is someone going to do with the human heads? The story doesn't mention how many were stolen. I just have this mental image of someone taking 5 heads for a kinetic experiment and putting them together to create a macabre Newton's cradle. Eee. While you still have those heads on the brain, here's our next story. U.S. Customs and Border Protection's agents probably rarely have a boring day, but between February 19th and 25th, officers in Philadelphia came across some particularly skin-crawly cargo. About 300 leeches from Bulgaria. The medicinal leeches, which arrived in jars distributed among 6 separate air cargo shipments, were headed for Connecticut, Florida, and Illinois, but they'll never make it. That type of leech, the Hirudo medicinalis, is protected species and can't be traded internationally. Instead, they were turned over to federal wildlife agents. Well, at least they were captured, unlike the heads. And we seem to have a theme here. U.S. border agents at the San Ysidro crossing in California stopped a 30-year-old U.S. citizen driving a truck on February 25th as he attempted to cross from Mexico. Agents found 52 live reptiles tied up in small bags. Not so weird, except that they were concealed in the man's jacket, pants, pockets, and groin area. 9 snakes and 43 horned lizards were seized. Some species were endangered. Well, at least there were no heads in the vehicle. How badly does a guy want or need to smuggle when you consider strapping lizards and snakes to your groin? And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first segment with me, Peter Anthony Holder, here on the Stuff File program, at 4:40 p.m. on March 4th, 64-year-old Kenneth Clark Carlisle walked up to his neighbor's driveway in his birthday suit and relieved himself. And no, it wasn't to urinate. He relieved himself on the neighbor's glass patio table. The whole thing was caught on not one, but 2 separate angles of the victim's home security video footage. Clearwater, Florida officers arrived at Carlisle's RV camper, where they spoke to him through the door, and he was still visibly naked and highly uncooperative. The bond on this incident is $250, but he was already in trouble from a December infraction, so he remains in the pokey. I know that things can be steamed cleaned, but for me, if I was that neighbor, I think I'm pretty much done with that glass patio table. Anyway, let's get to our first segment here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Another star has dimmed in Hollywood. Conrad Janis, who was a prolific character actor of TV, film, and stage, best known as Pam Darber's dad in Mork and Mindy, died on March the 1st in Los Angeles at the age of 94. I had the pleasure of talking to Conrad back in October of 2001. He was such a multifaceted talent, and there was so much to talk about. Here is part of that conversation now. I don't even know where to begin because you've done so much. I mean, you were talking about your jazz band. I mentioned Mork and Mindy. You started out actually as an actor in your childhood, didn't you?
Well, I was a child actor. I was in my prepubescent years, early teens, and I was acting on Broadway in a show called Junior Miss, which we then took all over the country. And Moss Hart was the director of that. And then I came to California and did a bunch of movies. I went under contract to Fox in the 40s, and then went back to New York City and started doing television. You were talking about series. The first series I did was a show called Jimmy Hughes Rookie Cop. And it was for the old Channel 5 Dumont, which was, I think we only had one or two channels in those days. And they had cameras that were literally wired together, held together with Scotch tape. And it was a very decrepit studio. And this series was quite popular, but the leading actor, Jimmy Hughes, who played the Rookie Cop, kept quitting. So I was now the third Jimmy Hughes Rookie Cop. And the people would tune in, and every couple of weeks there'd be a different Jimmy Hughes. But that didn't seem to bother people. I mean, they just accepted it. Well, he's changed now. He was Billy Redfield, then he was an actor named Donald Buca, and then I took it over.
I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of child actors from your era, because there are people like yourself who worked for long years as a young actor.
Dickie Van Patten.
Dick Van Patten, who was on this program, and also another one who was on this program just a couple of weeks ago. We had the original Dobie Gillis.
Oh, right.
Dwayne Hickman. And the thing that I always find interesting is you always hear of two kinds of stories from child actors. You always hear the absolute horror stories, and then you hear the stories like the three of you that I've just mentioned, who are just the happiest people I know with great memories. As I was talking to our producer off air, he was telling me when he was lining you up on the phones here, they said, "Gee, they sound like such nice people."
Oh, well, isn't that sweet? Well, you know, Dick Van Patten and several of us who started back in the theater in New York, and we've been working all our lives, and it's been absolutely fabulous. I've done several dozen Broadway plays. I've done bunches of movies. I've done hundreds of television shows. I also have my jazz band. I'm directing movies now and acting in them. We just did a film that my wife Maria wrote and produced and acted in called The November Conspiracy. It was a wonderful kind of a suspense story with George Segal and Elliot Gould in it. I directed it, and she's now working on 14 other projects.
Wow.
And many of which I will direct. One of them is called Riches to Ragtime, which is going to be a story about a bunch of musicians who get together and then eventually work their way down to New Orleans to enter a jazz contest down there. And she's got all kinds of stuff going. So we've been able to kind of live our lives doing things that we absolutely love doing, and I can't think of anything better to do.
You mentioned some of the people you started working with, like Dick Van Patten, and I asked this question of him. I'll ask it of you. Was it a difficult transition to go from juvenile actor to adult actor? Because sometimes the powers that be, the bookers, the producers, the casting agents, have a problem with people growing up.
Well, you know, when we started off, we were doing teenagers, right? And it was terrific because there weren't a lot of teenage stars. In fact, there weren't any back on Broadway. So you had as good a chance to get a role as anybody did. And if you're going to start in the business, the way to start is young because there's much less competition. When you get into your 20s and 30s, that's when you go, well, if you want a leading role, well, we can get Paul Newman, we can get Brad Pitt, we can get, and so on and so forth. But when you're a young actor, you're not against any kind of competition. As a matter of fact, I was starring on a CBS television show when Sidney Poitier spoke his first lines ever in a show. I was also starring on a Gulf Playhouse, where these are live television shows, those half-hour and hour dramas that we're talking about that were back in the so-called golden age of television. And I had to play a concert in the afternoon, had to miss a rehearsal, and so my agent said, well, there's this young actor who just came in from the Middle West, and he's never done anything, and he's a couple of years older than you, but if you sort of show him where to go and everything like that, he'll stand in for you for the, while you're at rehearsal and everything. So I said, well, what's his name? He says his name is Paul Newman. So he came over, and she said, give him $5. So he was such a nice guy, I gave him $10. That was Paul Newman's first job. I was in a play on Broadway called Time Out for Ginger with Melvin Douglas, which ran 2 or 3 years on Broadway, and they wanted to go on the road with it, but I didn't want to go on the road. So they said, well, here, this is the young actor we've hired who has never done anything before, but he's going to take your place, and his name, here he is, I'd like you to meet Steve McQueen. So when you're growing up, you meet all these people, and you see them, and they start out, and some of them get to be stars, and hundreds of them never go anywhere, never work again.
You do the big screen, the small screen, the Broadway stage. You're a musician. Is there one of those things that is your absolute passion, or do you just like them all equally?
Well, I don't know if you like them all equally, but whatever you're working on at the time, if I'm, you get so, one of the great things about working in the theater or on television or whatever it is, or even with a band, is that you get so involved in it. And when you really get involved and get emotionally attached to a project, it's like like a family. And whatever it is you're doing at the moment, that's your favorite thing to do. If I'm acting, then acting is my favorite thing to do. If I'm playing with my band, then playing with my band is my favorite thing to do. But my agent, very early on, my agent said to me, listen, you're going to have to make your mind up. You want to be an actor, you want to be a musician. So I thought to myself, I got to make a living somehow. And if I'm in between jobs as an actor, then I got to play with my band in order to make enough money to pay the rent. So I never gave up either one, and here I am now, and I'm still doing both. So,
I want to talk about some of the things you did on Mork and Mindy. How did you get that gig, Conrad?
Well, I tell you, I was in a series that Richard Benjamin starred in, that Buck Henry wrote, called Quark, Q-U-A-R-K. And the producer of it was Bruce Johnson, and we ran about a season on Quark. It wasn't a hit show, but the producer went over to Mork and Mindy, and he called me up and said, well, you've done Quark, now come over and do Mork. So I transferred over there.
And what was the experience like? I know you were on the show for a couple of seasons, and then you were gone for a season, or gone for a bit.
Yeah. I actually was. I did the first season. And at the end of the first season, they decided, and it was the biggest hit of the season. It was the #1 news show on the air. And so they decided, well, if one comedian is funny, then 3 comedians is going to be 3 times as funny, forgetting that the entire premise of the show was that it was like Stranger in a Strange Land. This fantastic character had landed from another planet, and all he knew about us was what he had seen on television. And so the concept was very funny. But if you add 2 other comedians to it, it just then became like a gag show or something like that. And then they got desperate, and they started showing, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and a lot of jiggle and stuff like that. And we went from #1 to #62 in about a month and a half. After and of course, at that time, I wasn't on the show. So they decided, we better get back to the original show, so they brought me back. And once we got back again and got back onto what the original show was all about, which was this sort of very plain family who had a visitor from outer space who was absolutely insane. And that was sort of the fun of the show. And the identification for people looking in, I believe, is that they could say, that's just like our family. We're sort of a dysfunctional family, and what would it be like, or a normal family, let's put it that way. What would it be like if some crazy person if Mork landed in our house? And Robin was so charming and so, such a wonderful actor and such a great comedian that it sold the show. So we picked back up again, and eventually we had a long run.
That's great. Now, I want to go back a little further to the beginning of your career. Didn't your mother, Harriet, have some connection with show business?
Well, she was a painter and a sculptor and a writer, and she ran an art gallery with my father. My father was, for about 20 years or 30 years, the #1 modern art gallery in the world, who was responsible for the showing of Pollock and de Kooning, and he showed Picasso and Leger, and he even started the popularity of the pop art movement, for which I suppose we can either pat him on the back or damn him, one or the other. But at any rate, he was a very world famous art dealer. And my mother helped along with the gallery, and also wrote books on her own about music and painting, and she also had a jazz record company, and they recorded people like Sidney Bechet and Louis Armstrong and Wild Bill Davis and Billie Holiday and so on.
Wow. Now, since you come from a background that has creativity and business sense together, were they very accommodating when you said you wanted to go and be an entertainer?
Yeah, actually, the first job I got, I went down to audition for, and I got on the end of a line because there was a kid in my class who was in a show on Broadway, and I'd always done the leads in all the school plays, never thought about being an actor. And he said to me, gee, I'm going to audition for this show, Junior Miss. You want to come along with me? And so I thought, yeah, that might be kind of fun. So we get online on the Lyceum Theater, and there were 450 or 500 young actors, and they marched us across the stage in groups of 6, and there were about 9 parts, and I got one of them. And so that was the start of the whole thing. So we played it on Broadway for a while, which was all right because my home was in New York City, but then they wanted to go on the road. So I announced to my parents that I was going on the road, and for some reason they said that was okay. I mean, I had to travel with either my mother, my father, or sometimes my uncles traveled with me because I was underage, and so I had to have a guardian. But it just occurred to me that years later, why would they have said okay? Why wouldn't they have said, no, you can't do that. You have to stay in school and finish your education. But they were quite open-minded about it, and they said, sure, that sounds like a wonderful thing to do. And there's a school in New York called Professional Children's School, and you can take a correspondence course and keep up with your studies, which, of course, I never did. But so I went on the road with the show, and by the time I got back, I was in my middle teens, and there was no, I loved the idea of being an actor, and there was no way I was going to go back to school. So that was that.
That was just a portion of the chat I had with the amazingly talented Conrad Janis. He died on March the 1st at the age of 94. As I mentioned, there was so much to talk to him about. When we spoke, it was just a month after the tragedy of 9/11. So not only did we talk about his very broad and wide-reaching career, we also chatted about how entertainers can do their part being socially conscious, especially during conflicts and wars. Plus, we also chatted about and to his equally talented wife, Maria, about the work that she had been doing. Sadly, Maria herself passed away just last September. The conversations I had with both of them can be heard in its entirety, including a few phone calls, as a Patreon reward extra. Visit patreon.com/thestufffileprogram program to hear that. A slightly shorter third version will also soon be available on my Audia page. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0656, and you'll find the link to the Audia track entitled Remembering Conrad Janis. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffileprogram. Available on Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and just about every other way you stream audio. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's radio that's everywhere you want to be, and some places you don't.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to the owner of the smallest movie theater in the world, and it's right here in Canada. Plus, we'll talk to the author of Ignite, which is a romantic thriller novel. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way, and much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. You know, most of us are feeling the pain and watching the horror of the events that are unfolding in Ukraine. But the Ukrainian people are showing a bravery and defiance that is second to none. No doubt you have seen people carrying posters that describe Putin in ways that we can't mention on a family show, and the resourcefulness of the average Ukrainian to do their part to fight back. I bring this all up because, like a lot of the world, the future of automobiles is electric, so you might find this story amusing. Electric vehicle chargers along Russia's M11 highway suddenly stopped working. Their displays directly address a message in Russian to Russia's largest electrical power utility. The chargers include Auto Enterprise electronic modules, which were made in Kharkiv, Ukraine. The company admits it hacked the machines to stop working and display messages. Several phrases we can't mention, but some of them include "Glory to Ukraine," "Glory to the heroes," "Death to the enemy," and a slogan that became popular during Russia's previous invasion of Ukraine, which I have to paraphrase, that likens Putin to the head of some guy named Richard. You get it, right? Clearly, Ukraine isn't giving up the fight, and they're also winning the war of words. Meanwhile, the 40-mile convoy of Russian tanks and weapons heading for Kyiv, Ukraine's capital city, is taking a long time to arrive. Experts have speculated several reasons as to why. First, it's Ukraine's mud season, which is bogging down heavy vehicles. Plus, some Russian soldiers are allegedly sabotaging their vehicles with pinholes in fuel tanks rather than fight against their supposedly Russian brothers, who would welcome their liberators. And I do air quotes when I say welcome. And then there's the tires on the vehicles. They appear to be cheap Chinese knockoffs that were not rated for such heavy trucks. You know, this once again is proof positive that a winning army's long-standing secret weapon is that the bad guys are sourcing from the lowest bidder. Okay, moving along. Here's the story of a guy who is completely unclear on the concept. When 30-year-old Bashir Ahmed of Youngstown, Ohio, was arrested on March the 7th, he told police that he was selling marijuana from the gas station where he was working the midnight shift because he just got out of prison and he needs the money. See, this is the unclear on the concept part. He just got out of prison, but he has a job. Okay, maybe he's not earning enough money, but hey, potato, potato. Anyway, the owner of the station called officers about Ahmed and produced a bag which Ahmed admitted was his that contained bags of weed and a loaded .38 caliber semi-automatic handgun along with suspected methamphetamine, crack cocaine, indeterminate pills, and over $1,000 in cash. Ahmed's previous convictions bar him from possessing a firearm. You know, prison is supposed to rehabilitate, but again, some people are just unclear of the concept. And speaking of prison, later this month, about 200 innocent people will go to jail in Switzerland just because the Zurich West prison is new and officials want to test it. Authorities have asked for volunteers, and 832 people signed up. That's too many to accommodate. The 70-hour trial run will be realistic in some ways, such as the requirement to surrender your phone on the way in, but body searches will be consensual, and there will be a safe word for those who want to leave early. Like me, are you a tad concerned about the people who, in this test, agree to a cavity search? Anyway, as a prison official said, as a participant, you can experience in a safe environment how it might feel for a real arrested person to suddenly be locked up. Well, not to be cruel, but if they really wanted the experience of what it was like to be suddenly locked up, then if they try to use the safe word, the guard should just tell them that they don't get to leave. That should ratchet up the angst just a bit. Anyway, let's get to our next segment here on this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? There's a little theater in Stratford, Ontario, a really little theater. In fact, the 13-seat Little Prince Micro Cinema is now in the Guinness World Records as the world's smallest purpose-built cinema in operation. Leigh Cooney, who is the owner and operator, joins us via Zoom to talk about it. Hi, Leigh.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the program with us. I gotta ask off the bat, was this something that you were striving for, or was it something that just happened that you were into the Guinness World Book of Records?
That's a good question. It was a little both, I guess. It was a bit more organic than that. When I set out to build this place, it was not my intention at all, actually. We were just going to build a little screening room. So, I mean, folding chairs, pull down screen, that sort of thing, just to support local short filmmakers. And then once I started doing it, I thought, we should do tiered seating, obviously, so you can see over people's heads. And then I thought, well, if we're going to do tiered seating, then we should put some old-timey wallpaper and some red velvet curtains, and it just sort of grew from there. And then it after a little while, it started looking more and more like a tiny theater. And then at some point, we decided to just do a little Googling, look for some inspiration out there, see what other people had done. And that is how we came across the previous world record holder for the world's smallest movie theater. And we thought, hey, ours is already by default going to be about 5 or 6 seats smaller than theirs. So we figured, well, then why don't we see what we can do? That took us about 2 years.
Now, when you say by default, you're talking about the screening room itself, which only holds 13 seats. Are you saying by default because that's literally how many seats it could fit?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was the room we had, and which is why we ended up with such a weird number. 13 is kind of an odd number, but the aisle takes up some of the space, so it leaves us to 13. Yeah, that's what we had. So we were already 3/4 or maybe halfway through the project before we discovered the Guinness thing. So 13 was what we had, and it just worked out well. It meant we didn't have to make any changes to make it smaller.
And to be clear, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's listed as the world's smallest purpose-built cinema. So we're talking, first of all, about just the room where patrons sit. Doesn't include the lobby or anything else, correct?
Exactly, that's right.
And purpose-built, meaning that it is designed to be a cinema and not just somebody's screening room in a mansion, because I would assume some of those are even bigger.
Exactly, right? It has to be purpose-built as a publicly operational cinema. It has to be open, because there's obviously someone out there with a 5 or 6 or a 10-seat home theater. No matter how nicely it's built, it might be built to look like a movie theater. It has to be open to the public. So that's what differentiates it.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning a little bit. As you just mentioned, the reason for you building this in the first place was to screen local films.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the local film industry that is around Stratford, Ontario. How far afield do you consider local films to be?
Yeah, so in the beginning, so it sort of came from the fact that we were operating, so the same space we're in now, it used to be a small business that I operated called Meet Your Maker, and there was a little handmade gift shop. And then the space that eventually became the tiny cinema was actually an equally tiny gallery, art gallery. So I used to just put on small, unique, outside of the box art shows for artists that wouldn't otherwise sort of get attention anywhere else. And somewhere along the way, we decided to start doing a 48, so there are other 48-hour film festivals out there, they're competitions for short filmmakers, but we just tacked a half an hour on and called it a 48.5-hour film festival. And we were doing that once a year off-site because it attracted a couple hundred people. And then and that's where we sort of got the idea of doing something, putting on something that big was a huge challenge. So we thought, why don't we do something throughout the year for, again, local-ish-esque people? So, we were thinking usually somewhere within 30 or 40 kilometers, because there's obviously Stratford being a very small city. There's not a huge industry here, but there's a handful of people. Some of them got their launch just working with us, actually. They're people who were handy with the camera. And then they went on to do all, their own work and send it off to other competitions, which is great. So, yeah, so that's sort of where that came from. It was, either established, quote unquote, I guess, short filmmakers, or in most cases, it was people who were just dabbling and were interested, and that's who we really wanted to support, was people who were kind of getting their feet wet a little bit in the short film industry. So, and then that, like I say, then it grew from there into being, we started accepting people from Toronto, being our closest big city, I guess, Kitchener, London, that sort of thing. And now we work with anybody who submits. Obviously, it's no longer a local competition thing. Now it's just an opportunity to showcase short films.
Okay, so it grew from real ideas. When did the idea of it perhaps being in the Guinness World Records come to your mind, and how did you approach them, or did they approach you? How did that work?
Right. Yeah. No, we approached them. Guinness being a UK organization, obviously, they don't have any of their own witnesses this far away. So we contacted them when we had discovered, again, I think it was I'm not sure how to pronounce it, the Cabiria is what we call it, but I suspect that's not true. The Cabiria Cine Cafe in Brazil was the previous record holder. And we Googled them, and as far as I could tell, they were actually defunct anyway, which sort of by default made us the smallest. So then we reached out to Guinness, and we had to get some of at first we were just interested in, what the process was. It turned out to be quite extensive, which we at the time did not realize, and soon came to learn over the course of the 15 or 16 months or whatever it was for us to get it took us to get to today, basically. Yeah, so we reached out to Guinness. We asked them, what does it take? They gave us a very long list of requirements, witnesses and architects and drawings and et cetera, photos, all these things. And then we started the process then. So this is going back to, I think, November of 2020. Yeah, so then we got to that point. We applied in November of 2020. And then between COVID and being shut down, because it's hard to be the smallest operational theater if you're not operational. So we were shut down a lot. And then, and we had to, hunting down witnesses. They came up with some very specific witnesses they needed. So, I think it was an architectural historian with a specification in the history of movie theaters in North America or something. I mean, it was way too much of a niche for us to find somebody. So we ended up combining a few people, a couple of architects, a couple of historians, that sort of thing. We kept going back and forth with Guinness, trying to find out what they needed, sending them, reapplying. They'd get back to us with something, we'd reapply. And then it took us, like I say, over a year, about 15 or 16 months until about last week when they finally responded and said, we're good. We have now got the record.
So now that you have the record and you're getting literally worldwide attention, were you anticipating the attention that you've been receiving? And what's it been like for you so far?
Yeah, no, we definitely weren't anticipating that kind of attention, actually. We worked with a local grant, like a tourism organization. Stratford's a tourism town, so it's, there's a lot of push for that sort of thing. And because we're unique and it's something different to the city, they were very encouraging and very supportive. And they were the ones who helped us put together a press release with a marketing company. And the marketing company sent out the press release on our behalf. And I thought, well, that's wonderful. We can maybe get a couple of newspaper articles. I had no idea it was going to get the reach it got. I mean, I just found out this morning we were on the Stephen Colbert show for a few seconds, for 10 seconds or whatever it was, which was to me enough. And that blew my mind. That was definitely not what I was expecting. It's been a really, really busy week. It's been, we're very small and understaffed. So we're trying to scramble to make the best of a situation while we have it, and the response has been phenomenal. And now we're just trying to make sure we can get back to everybody and they don't think we're just ignoring them.
Well, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Are you now concerned about someone coming along and building a smaller theater?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's been a concern, I guess, since day one. We thought to ourselves, well, if we could do this, then couldn't somebody else very easily do this? I think the one positive aspect of Guinness being so
anal? Anal is the word.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. For lack of a better word, for being so anal about what they required is that it makes it very difficult for someone else to come along and unseat us, right? It's, it's like someone else might think, oh, I can do that, no problem. And, they're going to whip something together and they're going to find out very quickly that it's not as easy as that, right? I did think about just building a second cinema that was like one seat, just so that if someone tried doing that, I could say, no, wait a second, we got another one here. It's just one seat. But no, that doesn't bother me, honestly. I figure it's only a matter of time, hopefully not a short time, but before someone does try. And I mean, that's okay. As long as we did it once and, no one can ever take that away from us. So it'll be exciting no matter what.
Well, I do enjoy a little wordplay. So obviously if someone's going to have to unseat you, they're literally going to do that.
That's true, actually. Yeah, no pun intended. Or I should say, yes, I intended that. So that was very deliberate. I thought that one out before I called. No. That is exactly what they're going to have to do. Literally unseat us.
Literally, do you think that this is going to be great for you for business? And by that, I mean, not the fact that you're going to fill the theater all the time because you only have 13 seats, but that it's going to bring in more attention and thereby more films that now want to be shown in the smallest movie theater ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be huge for us in a small way. Obviously, we're small, and we're limited in terms of how many people we can seat. So therefore, this is not exactly a massive moneymaker, and it was never intended to be. Right? We're just passionate about what we do, and if it keeps us in business and keeps us afloat, then I'm happy. But certainly, I mean, the response so far, the feedback so far has been phenomenal. I think it can only be good for us. I mean, there's only so many Saturdays in a week, and obviously everyone wants sort of the Friday night, Saturday night thing. But I mean, really the goal is, and this has been something we've been sitting on for about a year now, we were hoping to eventually open a second or third location. We thought, hey, there's other small towns like ours that can't necessarily carry the weight of a traditional movie theater. So we thought it might be nice to open little screening rooms in small towns, maybe around Southern Ontario to start with. And we were just holding off on that until we, came out the other end of COVID and got this whole thing launched. So, I mean, if, worst case scenario, this is, or I guess best case scenario, this is so good that we can't, that we can only book Friday night, Saturday night so many times, then what we'll probably do is open a second location with a similarly sized screening room, slightly bigger than this one, obviously, so that we're not competing with ourselves. So I think it'll be good. It'll be very, very beneficial in one shape or another.
By the way, what do you charge?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, right, we wanted to, just do little tiny ticketed events, but then COVID came along and made it so that we couldn't seat people together when they didn't know each other. So I mean, if we socially distance, quote unquote, people in here, we'd be sitting like 3 people, right? So we started doing private events and private rentals, and they get to choose their own movie. And so I mean, it ranges anywhere from like $125 to $250 if it's like a birthday party. We throw in bottomless popcorn and that sort of thing on the high end of stuff. So it's I think all things considered, it's relatively cheap considering you get, we give everybody the whole lobby area and the arcade machine and the popcorn area and the cinema all at once. I'd say on average it's probably $200 maybe if you take the low end and the high end together. So
well, congratulations on literally being in small business.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, thank you.
Leigh, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Leigh Cooney, the owner and operator of the Little Prince Micro Cinema in Stratford, Ontario, the smallest movie theater in the world. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0656, and you'll find links to their website. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Portions of the Stuff File program are available to you via Audia.io. At Audia, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of Stuff File program interviews going all the way back to 2009. That's Audia, AUDEA.io. There's more Stuff File program coming your way right after this break.
Peter Anthony Holder here. Often I mention my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. I also often mention that I'd like you to become a patron of the Stuff File program via patreon.com. Well, this is my opportunity to combine both of those pleas to you. You've heard me say on many occasions about the myriad of celebrities I've had the chance to talk to that are contained in my book, which is published by Bear Manor Media. You've also heard me mention that some of the celebrities in my book, and many others, can be heard on our page at patreon.com. Well, if you've been on the fence about joining Patreon, let me try to pull you over to our side. By becoming a patron, you help to make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. And if you do become a regular patron, as a Patreon reward, I'll share with you an electronic version of my book for your e-reader. So join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up today at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Coming to you from the outskirts of sanity, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come, we'll talk to the author of Ignite. Plus, we do indeed have an idiot of the day, but I've got one more Stuff File news story to share with you right here, right now. Paul Bishop, who back when this story begins was 52 years old, was vacationing in Benidorm, Valencia, Spain, when he had a bit too much hard cider. He had downed the rest of his cider and it decided to come back up. That's when he hurled into a trash can. When he headed to the next bar, his friend turned to him and said, "Where are your teeth?" Bishop rushed back to the pub and looked in the trash bin, but didn't find his dentures. They were found in a landfill and recovered, but Bishop hadn't left his name. It took more than a decade before it was cheap enough for authorities to run the DNA they found on the choppers, tracking them to Bishop in his Staley-Bridge, Greater Manchester, England home and sent them to him in the post. He was gobsmacked and stunned to get them, unbelievable even, and has told his story to various TV and newspaper reporters. Everyone knows about my famous teeth, he said. Gee, I'm assuming that in the 11 years since he lost his dentures, that his replacement was either better fitting or he drank less. Anyway, let's get to our last guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Nicole Fanning is the author of the second novel in her Heart of the Inferno series. This one is titled Ignite, and it follows the story of a dangerous Mafia don and his romantic entanglement with a nurse. Nicole joins us via Zoom from Florida. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, and well, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the program with us. Now, as I just mentioned, this is a follow-up to a previous story, but the characters are the same as in the first, correct?
Yes, there are. It's actually part of a quadrilogy. So there's 4 books total, and it just continues, the story continues over the course of those 4 main books in the series.
Now, they always say, write what you know, so I'm curious, what exactly do you know about Mafia dons?
Personally, I don't have any connection with the Mafia. I mean, that's, at least what my connections tell me to say. Wink, wink, just kidding. But no, I did a lot of research. I was always fascinated with the bigger underground crime organizations, just how they got away with it for so long, like how they functioned. When we think of Mafia, we think of like typical, what's been in the movies, the Sicilian Mafia. But, you have the cartel and you have the triads and you have all these different organizations all over the world that, have been in power and, are very good at staying discreetly in the shadows while they are in power. And so I just did a lot of research as to like more so what people said when they left those organizations or any connection that they had when they were involved with those organizations. Because you and I writing a book on a crime organization, we're going to paint them in a certain light, but someone who's either been in it or been around someone who's been in it is a different perspective. And what I found was really interesting was that those perspectives, those takes on it were all about how they had this intrinsic sense of like loyalty and honor to their family, not necessarily to a government. They have their own hierarchies and their own kind of like system of morality. And that was always really fascinating to me. So I thought about it from the perspective of like, okay, like what if we had the anti-hero, he's not a good guy, he's a bad guy, but he keeps worse. I have Jackson describe it in the book, I am a bad man, but it takes a bad man to keep worse men in check. So that's kind of what he does.
Almost like Robin Hood.
Kind of, yeah. Kind of like Robin Hood or like Peaky Blinders was another big influence for me where like they clearly are against the law doing shady things, but they have their own system of morality and honor and they would do anything to protect their own. And yeah, there was a romance to it for me. And again, like I'm a total nerd. I love documentaries and that kind of stuff. So I was like, how do I paint this in a way that would show him in a way that we, the reader, could fall in love with him while also understanding like he just does what he wants and he's going to get away with it. So
now you've already mentioned your anti-hero, I guess, which is Jackson Pace.
Yep.
So the nurse he falls in love with or who falls in love with him, that would be Natalie Tyler. How did they meet?
So that's actually a cool aspect of the story. Something you get a lot with Mafia romance in particular is this like hamster wheel of like several reoccurring ideas. So a lot of Mafia romance tends to focus on either, the Stockholm syndrome where she, hates him, but then she falls in love with him because he's keeping her captive. Or, it's like a marriage between two powerful families and they don't like each other, but then they fall in love. Or, something where like 365 days where he kidnaps her and, kind of Stockholm syndrome again. But I was like, okay, what if we just had these two opposing worlds and we had them clash in a way that was, a catalyst for both of them, like they're kind of stagnant at the point in their lives. And when they clash, it's just, from there. So they meet because Jackson is a widower and he has a 6-year-old daughter. And she kind of escapes her handlers and she's about to be kidnapped. And Jackson being a Mafia don, but he's also a hotel owner. So Natalie is in Chicago for her cousin's wedding. She doesn't want to be there. And that's a whole story. Her ex is really connected to the family, but she's just really uncomfortable with being in Chicago for this wedding, but she's going to go to support her cousin. So she's there and she's arriving at the hotel, and Jackson's daughter gets away from her handlers and she's about to be kidnapped. And Natalie sees this happening. And just as like a good person would not like stand by and just allow this to happen, she doesn't. And in doing so, puts her in the path of Jackson because she saves this little girl. And Jackson just cannot fathom because he comes from a world where it's you pay for service. So like, what is it that she wants? Why is she doing this? Nobody would just do this because it's the right thing to do. Like that's like, that doesn't make sense to him. Meanwhile, she's like, why is he such a jerk? Like, what's wrong with this guy? So it's not like the best of meetings, but he's just really skeptical of her. And she is, I wouldn't describe her as a wallflower, but she's got a real courage to her, like that mama bear personality, where she's going to be really sweet and welcoming until you try to like hurt the babies. So she got very protective over Jessica, who's Jackson's daughter, right from the get-go. And, it just connects them, and Jackson just cannot get her out of his head. So it's kind of just this beautiful story of him wooing her the old-fashioned way. So, he doesn't kidnap her and give her 365 days to fall in love with him, or, he doesn't do anything. I guess that's not true. He does some over extravagant things, but in the effort of, a lover trying to pursue someone that he's interested in.
You write this in first person, don't you?
I do. I switch perspectives. So the odd number chapters are Natalie and the even number chapters are Jackson. So that way readers, no matter, if they're male or female, can enjoy the book. And it's equal parts romance and thriller. So, the Jackson parts are sometimes a little bit thriller. And the Natalie parts are a little bit softer, but sometimes they switch and they're complete opposite. So yeah, it is first person from Jackson and Natalie's perspective.
It's interesting because when one thinks of romance novels, they generally tend to think of novels that are aimed at women, but you are trying to reach both genders.
I am. Specifically, that was my goal, was I wanted to create a book that, whether you are someone who enjoys, James Patterson or Stephen King, or whether you're someone who enjoys the Harlequin, you can find things in this book that you enjoy. So I think the marriage of the two keeps it very, like, the book doesn't slow down. Neither, like, Catalyst is pretty fast paced, and Ignite, kicks it into overdrive, like Top Gun Need for Speed kind of overdrive. But yeah, it goes pretty fast, and yeah, I'm trying to reach everyone and give everybody something to enjoy.
So basically, you are rewriting the genre, which I understand is not necessarily unusual for you. Didn't you rewrite scripts of favorite television shows as a kid?
I did. I was obsessed with the A-Team as a kid, and I'd like to preface it with saying that my mom was obsessed with the A-Team, and she owned all 5 seasons on VHS. And it went off the air 2 years before I was born. But when I was like 8 or 9 years old, she started letting me watch these. And I was just obsessed with the A-Team. And whenever I would get to an episode or something didn't end the way I wanted, particularly when it came to like, I wanted some romance in the show. And I don't know if you ever watched any of it, but it's not really a romance show.
Exactly.
It's kind of just like good humor, ragtag group of soldiers that, accomplish missions and, with very little resources, and they make something amazing. And it's not really a romance thing, but, like my little burgeoning romance writer heart was like, well, what if, there was a little bit of romance? So I would rewrite the endings to be more up to speed with what I wanted.
So this is something you've always done. Again, we should mention the fact that it's the heart of the Inferno series, and the second title is out. It's Ignite, and the first one was Catalyst, and there are 2 more to come in the series, correct?
Yes. Flashpoint is out in June of this year. That'll be book 3. And then Embers is looking for a winter of either 2022, if I can swing it, or 2023. And that'll be Embers. And so they actually cover the 4 stages of a fire. So Catalyst, Ignite, Flashpoint being the hottest point in the fire and Embers.
And if anybody wants more information, for instance, such things as release dates, which you just described, they can always go to your website.
Absolutely, and they can find me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter.
Excellent. Nicole, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Nicole Fanning, author of Ignite. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0656, and you'll find links to Nicole's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
An 18-year-old from Buffalo is behind bars after a judge revoked his release. Cahill Reeves has recently been arrested 8 times in relation to vehicle theft, crimes, and car chases. The Erie County District Attorney's Office says these incidents happened over a 2-month span. Yes, arrested 8 times since New Year's Eve. Reeves was subsequently remanded on 4 of his cases pending in Buffalo City Court. Very quickly, let's race through his charges. December 31st, arrested after police spotted him in a stolen vehicle. He refused to pull over and crashed into a parked car. January 11th, accused of driving a stolen vehicle. Prosecutors say Reeves and the others in the vehicle got out and ran from police, but Reeves was apprehended. January 12th, Reeves was seen in the driver's seat of a stolen vehicle. According to police, the victim's credit card, which had been reportedly used at a gas station, was found in Reeves' pocket. January 20th, Reeves was seen driving a stolen vehicle. Officers chased him, culminating in Reeves crashing into another vehicle. February 1st, Reeves tried to steal a vehicle from a residence in the town of Tonawanda, but the owner ran after it. Reeves and a 17-year-old were accused of running off with a backpack, which contained a wallet, 6 credit cards, and a pair of wireless headphones. Following this, police say they tried to get a ride from a rideshare driver, but police found them as they were getting into the vehicle. February 7th, Reeves and 2 others were allegedly seen sleeping in a stolen parked vehicle. February 17th, police responded after receiving a report of a suspicious vehicle. They say it was stolen and that Reeves was in possession of it. February 21st, while investigating vehicle larcenies in Amherst, police say the suspect's vehicle fled officers and drove into Niagara County. Reeves was accused of driving it. If you add up all the numbers, Cahill Reeves is 18 years old and in 54 days has 8 arrests and 40 charges. Son, you're not good at this. I mean, why? Oh, why? Would someone keep racking up stolen vehicle charges after repeatedly getting caught? One reason, and one reason only: you're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0656. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestuffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0656. Email me at peter@thestuffile.com. You could also find me on Facebook and Twitter as PA Holder, and don't forget to check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including CyberstationUSA.com, KDXRadio.com, PCJ Radio International and its partner stations, TrueTalkRadio.com, streaming on Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio, and over the air on World FM in New Zealand, MediaCore in Singapore, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, and CFMU in Hamilton. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Void where prohibited, offer slightly different in Canada. For a complete transcript of this program, next time write down everything Peter says.